First of all, Jason, thanks for being on the podcast with me. This is how it's going to be, conversational. And to me, that's when the greatest things come is, just chatting about you. And obviously you're a speaker, a performer, a former 3-point shot percentage leader in the state of Utah who got a scholarship offer to BYU his junior year. Where do you want me to keep going with this?
That's amazing, man. I never get introduced with all that. That means you read my book. I mean, dude.
That means I read something. That means I did my homework, right?
Yeah, those are the days, right? That's I don't know. What was his name on Napoleon Dynamite when Uncle Rico, he's like, yeah, man, I used to be able to throw a football over them hills, man, sitting in a hot tub with my soulmate. Those were the days if Coach would have put me in with him taking state. So, yeah, you're reading those old stories, man.
Dude, what's great about that is Uncle Rico, 2 years ago, got a resurgence into, urban myth legend because of Gardner Minshew. And that even makes it. So is this your swan song? Is this your swan song, Jason? Is that what you're saying?
It must be. I don't know, man. But I'll tell you, those were the days. And it's fun now that I have teenage boys that want to play basketball and want to shoot, and all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, when did you learn how to shoot like this, Dad? And it's not necessarily like riding a bike, but you get that basketball in your hands and you're like, yeah, I'll just come out here to half court and sink a few, freak you out. And that's what happened. And they were like, our dad's the best shooter ever. And I'm like, that's all I ever wanted my kids to say.
There you go. I mean, you gotta put the bar somewhere. You don't want to put it too high because then they, have this complex, but it's like, you got to put it there for them to be able to, really aspire to something. Right.
Yeah. And, while we're on this topic of, showing things, I actually have a fan that is now clanking on us. So I'm going to see if I can get it to stop. That's what's fun about virtual and podcasts and the whole deal. It's like life is happening all around us. We're in our houses trying to make this thing work, So anyway, I apologize to be looking up at my fan.
So it's only bothering you. I can't hear it. No one else can hear it. If someone else can hear it, then, good for them. But, there's an element of, I would say, the last year and a half now, as we're recording this July of 2021, is as a society, we've had to become more accepting of quirks, of kids running through the frame, of, people not having pants on. I mean, it's just all those things that we've had to come to grips with, some of them appropriate, some inappropriate, but yet to me that comes back to, some of the things that you wrote about in your book is like, hey, if we get hung up the way it's supposed to be, we're never going to accomplish what we can. In other words, if you would only say, hey, Todd, I will only record this podcast if the lighting is right, if every single one of your perfectly colored hairs is in the right spot and the sound is perfect and all those things, it would never happen, right? And you wrote about that in your book in regards to this idea of have the promise, and how you get there doesn't matter as much as the promise that you have and why you have that. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, that's really nicely said. And, when it comes to promises to self, and I don't know how far you want to dig into this right off the top here, but I'll just say that, a lot of us are considering to ourselves the promises that we've made perhaps to our work, our career. We're keeping promises here and there and everywhere, and we're pulling our hair out because we're missing one promise that we made to somebody else in order to fulfill another one. And then that leaks into our family life and our relationships. And now I'm not there for the kids' game. I'm not nailing everything into perfection as I want to. And then finally it comes down to us and our own promises for self. That's what this book was written for, is the beginning of a series of books that I'll be penning through the next few years about the different types of promises that we make and break and how we can keep them instead. And so, when it comes to like this virtual life that we've been living now for 16 months in this pandemic, it's been really interesting to see how much people are trying to be perfect, and yet authenticity shines through the camera, through the microphone. Things are going to happen. And I hope that as people are reading the book, as they're looking at chapters like habits or chapters titled Self-Acceptance. There are exercises at the end of every book that give you an opportunity to assess yourself, to consider your awareness, to forgive yourself, maybe for the first time, as you're reading my stories, because this book is truly, like you said, a chronicle of my life. And I am the ultimate promise breaker, but I'm also trying so hard to make promises that matter, the right promises, not just all the promises, because you're going to pull your hair out, but the right promises at the right time in the right places. And how can I make and keep those to me? That's what the promise to the one is. The one is you. What are your promises to self? And it's okay to not be perfect. Nobody's going to make it there. So how can we forgive ourselves? How can we make a new promise to be better tomorrow? To maybe just be a little self-aware, maybe have a little better integrity. Maybe we look around and we pick up the trash that isn't ours. But then equally, we say to ourselves, I can't be all things to everybody, but if I can keep a promise to myself, I'll be living at the highest level of joy, of happiness, of purpose in my life. And that's what I think where everybody wants to be.
You know, in your book, and as I imagine, it's part of your performing career, you know, as a performer, a speaker, all those things. You've had to weigh some of those times. You know, this podcast is about leadership, and I was on we're talking about values and leadership. We're actually talking about 5 levels of leadership with a team call before this. And I made mention that I've learned is, you know, really leadership in and of itself is disappointing people at a rate with which they can withstand it. And, you know, it's kind of said in this way is we're not going to make everyone happy. But, you know, to tie it in with what you have in your book, it's like, we only need to try to aim to make one person happy. And that should be through us. And, you know, I'm a person of Christian faith, and I believe that's God. And everyone's kind of their different, you know, whatever that driver is. To me, you got to have somewhere to find a path and go on it and stay on that path and drive. But I come back and say, if we're trying to make everyone happy, we don't make anyone happy. And you talked a little bit about your experiences. You had to make some pretty tough decisions, and that's affected you professionally. But I look at that as a snapshot from leadership, is we all have to go through those. And, you know, as you share in your book, and as you share in your story, you know, just kind of break down how you've now, you know, 18 years? No, not that long. Several years later, I'll put it that way. You've had to reconcile that almost as you perform and lead. Help fill all those things together for the audience.
Yeah, so when it comes to what I believe you're talking about would probably be the Las Vegas opportunity. And that would be it. What's fascinating to a lot of people about that would be, I might pose the question to your listeners and viewers to say, what would you do if your dream opportunity came along and it was completely the opposite of all of your values? Now, that's what happened to me in 2004. I had already been performing full-time for about 3 years, and I had put together a one-man show of comedy and music that was, wow, it was killing it all over the place. People loved it. It was G-rated, family-friendly, but it was perfect for corporate. And so it was the end of the night corporate show that every billionaire or millionaire or CEO could count on as their home run to leaving everyone happy after a 3-day conference. And I'm the awards show. They've golfed. They've gotten awards or they haven't. They've sat through speakers and seminars. They're exhausted. It's time to go home. The casino's just outside the door. Now we're going to introduce Jason Hewlett to make us laugh. You know, Tyler, the trick about that kind of thing is you've got to grab them fast. And so because I was a clean performer who was doing comedy and music all together, I was doing something really unique. Very much like Weird Al Yankovic meets Jim Carrey, if you will. It was bizarre, okay. Maybe with a little Billy Joel thrown in. And
the little piano man. Okay.
Yeah. So I'd come out there and I'd sing a song and people would cheer. But I had to nail it. You know, I had to do the voice. And so I created a show of all these voices, 100 or so voices, and it was really killing it. After 3 years of doing that well, I was receiving offers in casinos around the Strip in Las Vegas. And that was my dream, to be a headliner in Las Vegas as a one-man show. My hero, Danny Gans, who passed away about a decade ago or so, He was the man at the time. He was making over $100 million, was not a household name. That's where I wanted to be. And as his people started to come after me, or those that brought him to Vegas, the next thing I knew, I'm being offered pretty substantial life-changing opportunities. And when I realized what they were offering, and when I realized that it was not within the standards that I had set for myself, the promises I'd made for myself when I was young, that I would always do a family-friendly show. This opportunity came along and they said, we're going to manage you, change everything you've created, and you just need to do what we tell you and you will be successful. You will be famous. You will have your name on lights and on the cabs. And Tyler, I'll tell you, that was a tough one. Here, my wife and I, pretty much newlyweds, very excited for the opportunities ahead. And now I'm having to choose. Do I go forward on this path of opportunity? Do I take this while it's hot? Because this is probably my big chance. And think about it if you're somebody who's listening or watching and thinking to yourself, what if I did get that big promotion I've been after? What if it's at the expense of my family? What if it even flies in the face of the values that I've created for myself upon the foundation with which I've built my life? Am I still willing to take that because the money's good? Because I'll become the popular person I've always wanted to be? Even when it comes to posting something online, we have a choice every single time. And so within that moment, not even realizing this was my defining moment in my early 20s, this became the story of the promise. Why do we make promises to ourselves and why do we keep them? And also, why do we break them? We don't want to be the person in the relationship that breaks the promise. And the Promise to the One book explains how I got through that process, said goodbye to the casino offers in Vegas, have been blacklisted from being a headliner there because I turned it away at that time. And equally, that I can stand fully in my power, in my integrity, because your integrity is your harmony, to know that I kept a promise to myself and to my family, to my legacy, to the foundation upon which I built my career and my life, and that I can stand here and say, I can teach you how to make and keep better promises to yourself to live the life you want to create.
You bring it up in there. It undergirds, in my belief, it undergirds everything in leadership. It undergirds how you come to that promise, and you talk about it, the values. And, you talk about integrity. One of the values that I believe, hit on earlier was forgiveness. The ability to forgive and forgive those that hurt you, forgive yourself, and march on. What are some of the other values that you think, especially as a leader, that, when we're leading people, when we're trying to make a difference, when we're coming into grips of that same thing? Oh, I've been this performer. Now I get this promotion. Now all of a sudden I find out things behind the corporate doors that I wish I didn't know. Well, how do I need to carry myself? What are some of the other values that you've experienced through that process that you think are really pivotal to upholding that promise?
And I love that question. It comes down to, I believe, our character, our willingness to be humble, even within the pride that can creep in. We have to have a strong enough ego to believe that we can lead, and yet a strong enough ego to set it aside to be humble enough to lead. Yeah. And so as we follow the great leaders that we look up to, the John Maxwells, the people that have come before, whether you're a person of faith or not, I'll tell you, having the holy word to read and to see the words of the prophets and of God himself and say, yeah, that's how I become a leader. I believe that in the values of those written words, as well as the good words that we can read or listen to in a podcast like this, where we say, I know how I can forgive myself, become a better man. I know that I can be authentic and I can be strong. And within that, a leader is vulnerable. If you're willing to be vulnerable, there is only power within your willingness to go to that place. Unfortunately, people look at vulnerability somehow as a weakness. And there is nothing stronger than a leader who is vulnerable in his authenticity and can share that he's struggling through the pandemic or through a great crisis and says, this is what is, and this is what we do about it. And we listen to those that we lead. I believe the greatest leaders are the listeners. Even though I make a living as a speaker, I'm much better at listening. I am very good at watching someone do what they do because I'm an impersonator at heart. And when I watch a great leader, I go, I want to impersonate that guy. And my question for your listeners is, how would somebody impersonate you? What are your leadership qualities? They are your signature moves that make you stand out in a sit-down world. All of us have them. Have you identified, clarified, and magnified them? Because that's your promise.
Well, and I think that's where people get twisted, especially from a leadership point of view. It's like, well, wait a second. And this is a great facet of leadership that fails. Is like when you're saying one thing and doing something totally different. And that authenticity, really it goes through all of it. It's, again, one of those values and how it's displayed out through character and humility and all those factors. People look at us, well, wait a second. Jason's telling me this, but then behind the scenes, he's doing something totally different. Why do I want to do that? There's some people today that I really feel challenged with when I hear them. It's like, man, I love everything they say. And yet when I look who they surround themselves with, or I look how they carry themselves, I'm confused. I'm like, there's a part of me that it's just like, I'm not sure what to make of this, almost catfished. And, to me, that comes back to all these values you've talked about and really, go through and, as you kind of described, it's how you identify them, how you clarify them, how you magnify them. And once you do that, then you start living them out. And it really is following that.
I love how you say that, Tyler. I appreciate it because I'm with you, man. I watch people that give some of the best advice I've ever heard, and I know about their lives in some cases, and you go, why are you teaching relationships when yours have fallen apart due to infidelity? And not to be judgmental, but to say, is this somebody I can actually listen to and learn from because they are value-based, because their mission is so-and-so and such, in order to say, I believe you. Because the congruence on and off the stage has to match up. If you're great on stage and then all of a sudden you're some promise-breaking person off stage, I can't believe you. It doesn't mean that I have to be at an 11 amount of energy like I would be on stage all the time, right? Then I'm going to blow everyone up with my energy off the stage.
Totally.
So I say it's not a matter of incongruence to be a different version of self. It's just a different level of illumination, right? I'm an 11 on stage shining my light bright, but I might be a 5 if you meet me and you might be, hey man, you're pretty mellow. And it's like, well, I'm still the same person, but I'm shining something brighter when I'm in front of 10,000 people in a stadium speaking and as a keynote speaker at an event. And so when we think about that congruence, that's important. The other thing I like to say is that the commercial versus the reality needs to find its place within your promise. So if we've had something advertised to us and it does not meet the expectation, that is a broken promise, whether it's in your company or in someone meeting you. If they see on your website or they hear you on a podcast and they're like, that sounds like the coolest guy, and I bet he's so great. And then the reality is you meet them and you're like, they are nothing like I thought, or that business did not even keep the promise they advertised. We don't want that to happen. We need the reality to be greater than the commercial. Deliver more than is advertised. That doesn't mean to pull back on the promises that we make. We're not saying under promise, over deliver. We're saying make the right promises and then deliver, which will exceed the expectations. And that will lead everyone to say, that's a great leader. That's a great company. Mm-hmm. It sells itself.
You talk about shining your light. And there's certain trainings at time that have said, from a sales point of view, from a leadership point of view, you have to be this chameleon. I can remember going back to my early days in sales, and they're like, well, this guy is great because he's a chameleon. I'm like, I just don't get that. And to me, it's not being a chameleon. It's just understanding how to turn that light up and down. And sometimes it's really dark and you need a spotlight. And sometimes it's not, and you just need a little bit of light. So I love how you describe it that way. It's like, how do you turn that dial, kind of that, that light dimmer that, our light dimmers are sliders. So we slide it with our finger. To me, that's a great way to look at it because, again, what you find through that is you are who you are. and then you adjust based upon the circumstance. If I'm, again, loud and obnoxious in a situation that needs to be calm and reserved, and yet that's, I'm still being I'm saying what I say, I'm, who I am, that isn't as well received. And at the same point, if you're hiding in the corner when you need to be engaged and as a part of the crowd, you're not helping either.
Right.
And
that's
to me,
exactly
that's not a chameleon. That's taking that light dimmer up and down.
Yeah.
Describe that.
When it comes to our light, and it comes to the ability to shine that which makes us who we truly are, we have the opportunity, whether we want to shine it on the hill or keep it under a bushel. We know this from Scripture. It's a choice. It's a choice as to how much we'll magnify that which makes us uniquely who we are, or to hide it from everyone else. And in the Promise to the One, I teach in those exercises how you can identify, clarify, magnify your light, your gift, your promise. And so often it's things that we were good at when we were a kid. And maybe somebody told us along the way, you're not good at, so you stop. Or imagine the things that you've found as you've gone along in your leadership, and you're like, I can do this. But then you get put in a position where you don't get to use it. Imagine if we were able to pull it out of ourselves, identify more signature moves that clarify that we have greatness among the team and with all that we do, and now we can magnify that light. And so, yes, the whole book is based around this concept of spreading our light, spreading that which makes us uniquely who we are, that God sent us to the earth to be, and how we can share that light with everyone is so important.
So I'd love... One, because I'm going to make an assumption here that a lot of people listening have read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. I've had several different guests at times where we've talked about purpose, the purpose factor, finding your purpose of worth, and so on. Take, as I see you encouraging that sign about Simon Sinek, you've read that book. Take, and how does the promise fit into the why to your purpose? Bring all those together and how they fit together in your mind in regard to how someone, again, can show up, can bring their talents to the table, can lead, can serve others.
Yeah, so not taking anything from Simon. I mean, obviously, Start With Why is a landmark book, and everyone should read it if they haven't. And Simon, I follow his stuff. He's incredible. The point is that when it comes to our promise side of things, we just have to, where he's talking more about like your reason, your the middle part of everything that you do, which is your why. For me, I'm talking necessarily about that we have so many great gifts, so many talents, and that are natural, and we've created skills for ourselves. I challenge the reader to consider that they don't just have one signature move. They don't just have one reason or why in this case, but rather they have even potentially 100. And I challenge them to write all the gifts and talents that they have, the skills that they've created, the attributes they want to create for themselves. And then once we've done that process on our end, now we have our top 10 list of the skills, attributes, gifts, and talents we feel are ours. Now we go to the clarify portion of the ICM process. Clarifies when we ask other people. We can clarify that with the leaders that lead us, or our clients and customers. Ask them why they buy from us instead of the competitor. We could clarify that with our family. This isn't a time to ask for improvement notes. There's plenty of time for that. This is a time to help us receive words that we've never considered for ourselves. In other words, if I ask my wife to clarify for me what makes me great, I may have identified in my top 10 list that I'm funny and entertaining, right? Where she clarifies for me, she says, well, you are funny and entertaining, but I think you're thoughtful. I think you're attentive. I think you're careful. I think you're fun, not just funny. But these words start to help me see myself in a new way, at a magnified way, so that I can then go and magnify my promise. And so where we might start with why, or identify our why with Simon Sinek, obviously that's a major purpose that we come up with and say, that's where I'm going. Now imagine if you know your purpose and you bring in from the ICM process your promise on top of your purpose to say, I know my purpose, plus I know my promise to the world to share it with everyone. it will magnify the way that everybody lives and the way that we help others to live. Because when you teach somebody the ICM process and you start to give them their skills and gifts and talents that you see in them, changes the way you lead, changes the way they lead. It ignites this passion for work, and it brings together this promise culture that perhaps has never existed in the organization.
It really comes down into using that as a tool to develop people. And really, it's develop them into the leaders that they can and have the talents and abilities to do so. And then that's when everyone accomplishes more. To me, that's where I just get excited. And I absolutely, one of my promises is help others accomplish more. And to me, it's so much fun. And, as I've realized part of my purpose there, as I've shared in times before, and I recently just kind of figured this out, is help other leaders get healthy too. I had to get healthy from a relational, an emotional point of view. I had to become more empathetic, all those things. And to me, that process of learning that is a promise that I've made to myself. It's like, hey, I need to put my arm around people. Let's walk together. And so I love how you kind of bring that in. And to me, it's a great description of the process of developing leaders. Is you develop yourself, you develop others through that process. So love you sharing that.
I love how you put that, man. I love that. Developing leaders. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. If we're the ones that are the leader that says, I should do everything myself, I have all the gifts and talents, well, you're not going to lead for long. And even if you do, then everything's going to fall apart when you leave. And so I've been guilty of this myself. I mean, when I say to myself, I should be doing all of these things because I can get it done quicker, cheaper. I had to burn all the ships so that I could bootstrap through the pandemic. Well, I had to do some stuff that I didn't want to do or I wasn't good at. But, eventually you get to the place where you're like, man, I need to hire somebody to do that, because not only is it me not doing my greatest skill set, but equally I could be having someone else magnify their great talents. I mean, it'd be like me saying, I'm going to fix my computer because there's a problem with it, and I know nothing about computers. I can Google it. I can YouTube video it. I'm going to try to chop through it. Might take me 3 or 4 days and I won't even fix it. But if I go and find a friend or an expert that knows exactly what to do with the computer, they can fix it in 1 minute. What a waste of my time. What kind of a leader am I that I would waste my time doing that? And so, yes, to help other leaders to grow and to learn and to find theirs and to utilize theirs, that's what's the best part of life. All of us are unique. We all have our gifts and our promise.
And it's a attribute that I think has come up in many, many podcasts, is that's a great way to add value to others and tell them, hey, this is the talent I see in you. It's identify that in them. It's like, hey, yeah, I could do this. But you know what? You're better at it. I can go do things that you can't do, and we're all better for it. And it doesn't mean I'm discounting my abilities or, yours is just saying, hey, I recognize in you. And sometimes if I allow you to add value to me, that's going to help you grow to an area you didn't think you could. And so that makes it fun to me, is to be able to see that in people and say, hey, yeah, you go do this. And it's also, there's another factor of that is part of leader is we have to think about things that take time to think about. And, sitting down, fixing your computer, then you're not thinking about how can I do what I uniquely do to be able to convey a message that no one else can.
Nice. Beautifully said. And I love it when somebody tells me that they've received from others clarification of their talents. And so I would challenge anyone listening or watching that if you were to say to yourself, when was the last time I pointed out the gifts, skills, and talents of the people I work with? And I just sent them a little note, maybe a little text, and just say, hey, that email you composed to the team was just awesome. I love how you use your words. That will ignite in them the ability for them to say, I have a signature move for that. I should do that more and better. And are we clarifying that for others, especially in the home? I think in the home especially, we're saying, we need to fix this. We need to do this. Stop doing that. You can't do that. Imagine if with our kids, because I have teenagers now, imagine if instead of just don't, say instead, well, yes, you did something incorrectly with your friends. However, you have leadership qualities in the fact that they followed you, in the fact that they are interested in what you think and what you create. So what are you going to do with that? And it shifts the thinking of ourselves. So I would challenge anyone that's listening that hasn't complimented someone lately, hasn't pointed out the gifts and talents and strengths of the people they're surrounded by. Try it. Go if you want to go to my Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever, you'll see that it is a compliment fest, and it's only to build up the self-perception of everyone around me, because that for me is one of my best qualities. Is I am a great cheerleader, and I want everyone to know how awesome they are.
Yeah, well, to me that is an attribute of great leaders that has gotten I would say overshadowed at times, because you mentioned earlier this image of what CEOs, executives, leaders should be. And I had a friend share this with me. He shared on the podcast. It's, Brad Lomick, and he goes, the CEO of old is the guy that stood up in front of the boardroom, and he's like, starch suit, no sweat. He's like, this is the way we're going to do it. And he goes, the guy now, he stands up there and is like, look at my sweaty pits. I'm sweating, but you know what? Everyone in this room, I believe in you. We can fix this. Let's go. And to me, that is so inviting, and it's because that's being a cheerleader. Say, I believe I'm sweating because we're hot and we're going through this, but everyone else around me, I have faith in you. Let's go do this. We can do it. And to me, that's a lot more fun than saying, oh, it's all on me to sink or swim, and I got to figure this out all on my own. Because to me, that's not a leader. That's just someone going for a hike. And I'd much rather be a leader, a collaborator, put my arm around people. And I think that's, you haven't gotten to where you're at. Even when it was your one-man show, it wasn't just you. There were sound techs. There were people making everything that was making it happen. And I believe, if I'm just going to guess as I'm asking this, is there's a lot of those lessons that you learned that as you come back now, it's like, there's a reason why you didn't take that, because who knows, the headliner in Vegas, because were you the person that you are now then? No. And so it's like, what would have happened to you? What could have happened to you that, was forsaken? And to me, that's all of us go through that leadership journey.
Yeah. And, success wasn't guaranteed. I mean, that's just the point.
Yeah.
It could have turned at any point where they said, hey, you're not worth it. We're not going to do this, and that could have happened for sure. And as I look back, in fact, I was in Las Vegas yesterday for this big conference. And as I'm walking down the strip and I'm looking at my friends up on the billboards, and they've got their life and they're doing amazing things, and I'm so proud of them and many of their, worldly achievements and so forth. I also have to think, would I spiritually be where I'm at if I'd have done that? Would my family be the same? Would I still have the same foundational marriage that I began with 20 years ago? I'm so grateful that there were a couple of choices that made all the difference so far. And to have somebody like a wife, a spouse that you look at and say, this is my rock, my foundation, the person that I can count on, and they're going to count on me as well. And for those people that are out there saying, man, I don't have somebody like that right now, that's okay. You have way more people that are on your side than you believe. And so when you start thinking about who you can be accountable to, who you can bounce ideas off of, who you can ask, hey, am I living my best life? What do I need to do to catch the blind spots? In fact, I went to dinner with Clint Pulver, one of the great speakers in the world. And I said to Clint, as he's asking me all this stuff, he's like, Jason, I have all these questions. You're my mentor. And I'm like, dude, you're like my mentor now, and you're 10 years younger than me. Clint is exceeding so fast. He's such a great, great author and speaker in person. I said to Clint, hey, you know what? Thanks for asking me what you think, that I think, but I'm curious about what you think, Clint. What are some of my blind spots? I mean, you read my blog, you see my videos, you're on social media with me. What are some of my blind spots? And in trust, in listening, and in a very careful tone, he leaned in and he told me a few things that he said, I know you don't realize this, and I hope this helps. And I was so grateful that I would ask the question of someone I trust. and that he would trust me enough to tell me the truth, even though he knew it probably stung. And it does. It hurts a little bit to be like, oh, you're right. My blog is a little wordy for today's reader. And the things that he told me have now allowed me to reassess what I'm going to deliver to my audience. We talked about my website, social media, other places where he said, I think these things could be improved. And I said, thank you for being the kind of leader that wouldn't shy away from the opportunity when someone asks you how they can improve.
Yeah. Well, it's an element we all need. It is that is the only way we as leaders can and will get better. We have to be vulnerable enough to do that. And we also have to have people around us that are strong enough or care enough. Because there's a lot of people that are close in your life that would tell you, Jason, oh no, you're doing great. Oh, it's wonderful. And yet they hear all the things, they know what's going on, but they don't want to hurt you. And that doesn't help you grow either. And so it's having that care and that candor that's described. It's having, vulnerability on yourself. And that is a facet that I believe every leader needs to hold themselves to being able to go higher. If you want to go higher, serve more people in a bigger way. And that doesn't mean it's a rank, it's a, whatever. Going higher to me is going deeper with people to help them accomplish more, to get where they didn't think they could. And so I think that is all part of that. And I applaud you for that, because that's a journey that we all should be taking some way, somehow, every day.
I love that, Tyler. Going higher is going deeper. That is legit. And you're so right. Because, yes, it's all about driving into the foundation. The deeper the foundation, the stronger and greater we can build. And so when we build upon those values, those things which we promise ourselves, and if we're willing to listen to the feedback of someone we trust, then it's awesome. What happens is when we start to listen to all the chatter, and I mean, if you're online, if you're out there throwing, ideas out to the world or videos, and people are ripping apart your podcast like, hey man, you're so stupid, or whatever, the reviews of the person in the anonymity of a dark room. Well, I don't know that person. Maybe that'll help me a little bit to think, yeah, that's helpful, or that really hurts. But do I listen to the person that matters to me, that has my best interest at heart? And is there a way that I can improve if I listen to them? For me, when Clint Pulver says something to me, I listen, I do the change, and it makes all the difference. And I'm grateful for it.
Yep. Well, Jason, I'm grateful for this conversation. I'm grateful to, through Clint's connection, be here speaking with you, and so excited and thankful for your book, and excited for people to take it on and read it and grow. And so thank you for your time today, man. Can't wait to see more, hear more. Before we sign off, I want to say this. And again, there's no dog and pony show here. There's no impersonations. But I just would ask, if there was one of all the shows that you did in Vegas, what was the one piece that you're like, man, I can't wait till I get to that point. I can't wait till I do that, because I know the audience is just going to be blown away. What was that one? That's
funny. That's a great question, because there were little moments and spots that I built in the show. So it's never just a flat line and then you're slowly going up a slope. It's never a wave either necessarily, but rather it's a wave that builds and slowly ascends. And so I would take them on these peaks and valleys that was like emotion, funny, laughing, crying, movement, all that. And I'm dancing, I'm singing. Anytime I would introduce a new something, they were blown away by each little piece, as if to say, how many gifts can this guy have? And all I was doing essentially was just bringing all my bag of tricks from my youth that had made my friends laugh. So at the beginning, and I'm going to give you a couple here. At the beginning, okay, I'd come out on stage and I'd be like, hey guys, you remember the Bee Gees? Oh yeah, the Bee Gees from the 70s. I'm going to sing like them. Well, you can tell by the way I sing this song, I sing it loud, I sing it loud. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, he sounds like them. And then I would take them up to the next place where I'd say, hey, how about we do some piano? And I'd sit down at the piano and play Elton John. I remember when a rock was young, me and Susie had so much fun. La, 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 la. And they're like, whoa. And then they go, how cool is this guy's voice? He can sing all the high stuff. Then I'd say, how about some Louis Armstrong? And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. And they're like, wait a minute. And then I'd go into the Velociraptor from Jurassic Park. And I'm chasing my kids around the house, and they're laughing like, what are we watching? This guy's transforming into all these different faces and voices and things that he can do with his face that no one else can do. But Tyler, with every piece that I introduced, it actually inspired in the minds of the viewer to think to themselves, what am I not sharing? What is it that I'm holding back? Because that guy looks so stupid, but it's awesome. So how is he so brave to do that on stage? And the truth is, it's my promise to share my gifts that only I have. And if I don't, then I'm cheating the world of the gifts that I have been given, the skills that I have cultivated. And so that's why I like to talk about the promise, that we all have a promise to share our uniqueness, that which makes us incredible leaders. And I don't know, man, I hope that answered your question, but each little piece was just so fun to introduce. And by the end, they were like, show us more. And I'm like, I think I gave you everything because my promise is to do that.
So there's no encore. There's no usher you off stage. Okay, I'll come back.
Yeah, the encore was like coming out and wiping my brow and saying, I have given you my all. I love you. Have a good night. And then I'd fall on my back like Jim Carrey, So it's like, well, have a good night. So it was fun. But Tyler, thanks for having me on here, dude. I really admire your work, and thanks for including me.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.